Good morning, everyone. Well, I just want to start by saying what a privilege it really is for me to have been in this sphere that I'm really passionate about for nearly a decade. I think it was 9 years ago when I first joined the Rural Development Fellowship, and I was a fresh graduate. I was sparkly eyed, absolutely optimistic, born and brought up in a big city in the Northeast. And then suddenly I was flung into a remote, rural, unreachable by public transport village in south of Gujarat. I think it was the first time where I saw people struggle with basic amenities. So we're talking about water in households. There was no running water. There was no electricity. The place was not reachable by public transport, very remote. And we talk about community health centers so much in the development world. And this was the first time that I actually got to see what a community health center was, and it wasn't encouraging. This was a completely new experience for me. I was going to spend 13 months of my life in this village living with a protected tribal group. I'm in the Dang district, which is a tribal district, very marginalized in south of Gujarat. And my 13 months began now. So I started my social assimilation. I was introduced to Romni Ben and Satish Bhai by the NGO that was facilitating my fellowship. And from the get-go, I could see that Romni Ben was a star of the family. She was a young mother, 2 kids, and Satish dot on her. And she was confident, more confident than he was, and absolutely involved in all of the village runnings. And I was the same age as her. She was 23, mother of 2. I was 23 back then. So I started to set the context of what the place was where I am. Chichinagauta was not really a village. It was a hamlet in the corner of an actual village. Why was it in the corner of an actual village? It was because the Konthoujam, the community that I was working with, they were not allowed to be in the actual village. They occupied the lowest rung of society. And I learned from Romni Ben what life was like that, to be marginalized, to be excluded from the day-to-day life of a main village. She also taught me about several things. What other initiative had happened then with regards to gender. So she talked about how the NGO tried to teach them bakery, the women in this village. And she also told me why it failed, because in Chichinagauta, nobody eats bread. In Chichinagauta, nobody is going to buy bread made by somebody from the Kotwalia community. So why would bakery work within the women of Kotwalia, right? So I realized that Romni Ben and I need to be best friends. We need to be a research duo. I need to be having several conversations with women like Romni. So I set out to understand the workings of the village. Romni told me about how menstrual health and hygiene was questionable, unhygienic in this village. So I said, Romni, what do you want to do? What do you use in the village? So she said, usually we're using rags. So I said, okay, you're used to cloth. Let us make a cloth pad out of this. And so we gathered a bunch of cloth pad designs from all over India, and we started studying them. But as we were studying them, I realized, I myself don't know a lot about the biological process of menstruation, and neither does Romney. So we started educating ourselves, and then we started building this module wherein she started telling me, you should teach about this in this particular way because the community would be better responsive if you say this instead of that. So Romney and I built a learning module for the community in Konthoujam. She would translate it in Hindi in Konthoujam and Gujarat, and I would say it in Hindi, and we were teaching the adolescents. I said, Romney, the adolescents are free all the time. How do we engage women? So she said, let us move this adolescent classrooms closer to where the women are making baskets. So the Kotwalia is known for making baskets. They make it by hand. Women, if you visit Chichina Gauta, you will see women in groups making cane baskets, right? So Romney and I started moving the classrooms very closer to this group of women who were working, making cane baskets. And once we started talking and talking about menstruation and the biological process, I started realizing that the women were listening more when we started talking about the fertile period in a period cycle. So I was teaching the students that, usually women are more fertile in a particular period of the month. And if you don't want children, then you avoid this period, etc. So one of the women afterwards came to me and said, see, Angel Ben, I would like to learn more about that because we have issues with family planning in the village. So then I realized that we had a value add. Now I get to engage with the women and I have their interest now. So I was engaging with the women in terms of fertility, etc. And then I met Manvi. So Manvi Ben said, why are we not producing this in the village itself? You've brought all these cloth pads, you're showing it to us, you're testing it, etc. So why don't we do a deep dive into product development, make a cloth pad that is specifically for the women of Kotwalia and their livelihood and their lifestyle, etc. So I said, that's an incredible idea. Over the course of this talk, you're going to realize that most of the ideas are coming from the women that I work with. I am just there facilitating. So I said, Manvi, that's a great idea. And then Romni's husband, Satish, comes around and he says, there is a tribal support development initiative going on right now with 8 women who are learning tailoring in the village. So why don't we engage a tailoring teacher and the class to teach them how to make cloth pads for the women here in the village? So I said, Satish, why, that's an amazing idea. Let's do it. Let's talk to the Tribal Support Development Initiative. So we go there, and the 8 women there, the tested product is tested in such a way that there are so many components from different cloth pad designs that the women liked. So we took all of these designs from each of these cloth pads and put them all together in an ultra cloth pad that was specifically liked by the women of Chichinagauta. So then we got into production. I sourced the flannel, which is the material that they liked, using the NGO collaboration that I had during the fellowship. And then the 8 women who were training to make cloth are now making cloth pads. So Manvi, very young, she's 19. And she's also a mother. So she says, with a child on her hip, she says to me, you know what, let me do a research on how much this can sell for in neighboring villages. So I said, that's a great idea again. So she does this community work where she goes to the neighboring villages and she starts talking. She starts talking to women. How much would you pay? How much would you pay if you didn't have to use rags and you could actually develop and buy a cloth pad? So she comes back and she says, XYZ, this is the price point, and we need to start talking to neighboring villages and we need to start selling this. So now the Tribal Support Development Initiative with the tailoring has already given 8 sewing machines to 8 women. So Manvi says, we need to turn this into a business. I say, okay, let's do it. And the day we are supposed to demonstrate our product to the nearby village, I show up at Manvi's house, and she's not ready. So she's in the kitchen, she's cooking, and we were supposed to be leaving. So I go up to her in the kitchen, and by this time, I'm allowed to get into people's houses. I've been living there for 6, 8 months now. I go to Manvi and I ask her, what's happening? But I do it in a hushed voice because I could see that her mother-in-law was around. And she says, I can't go. I'm not allowed to go. So I said, this is your idea. We're doing this because you've initiated this. This is your idea. And she says, I can't go. My husband tried, but my husband is also young. He's only 19. And he's the youngest in the family. And I've been told that I can't go to the neighboring village to do this business proposition with you. So I said, okay, we'll go ahead. We're not going to fight this. So I leave Manvi, I go with Romney, we go to a neighboring village, and it's a hit. It's all sold out. They're buying it. And we come back, and we tell Manvi the good news. I mean, she's obviously feeling left out, but we tell her the good news. And what happens is this continues on. The business continues. She makes them, but she can't go. She can't go to sell them. She can't go to interact. And this is her business idea. Oftentimes, I ponder upon these two women, right? Romney Ben, Manvi Ben. And they're not less ambitious than each other. We can't compare them. They're equally ambitious, equally smart, equally driven. So what has really stopped Manvi is permission. Romney has Satish. Satish drove her to the neighboring village, allowed her. And Manvi doesn't get permission. She's not allowed. So I often think about this as I have continued on in my career. I think about autonomy, household autonomy. I really focus on the fact that gender work is not solely focused on women. It doesn't work in silos. Gender work needs an ecosystem. It needs male inclusion. So when we talk about household autonomy, men have that space. So as a development practitioner, I am not here to change age-old gender norms, etc. But I am here to look at what can be a low-hanging fruit. Where can I put my foot in, wherein I can engage with men? I can understand what they think of gender norms, and I can understand what will work in this community. I can forever go on in Chichina Gauta talking to women about menstruation, about business designs, but if the space is not relinquished by the gatekeepers of society, men, mother-in-laws, whoever has more power, more autonomy in the household, these processes are not going to work. These interventions are not going to be sustainable. I do 100%, again, want to stress on the fact that gender work cannot happen in silos. Gender work needs an ecosystem, a supportive ecosystem. There was really something heartening in Bangladesh, where I work. There was a group of women that was engaged in fishery. They were doing really well. They were producing large fishes ready to be sold in the market. And their husbands stepped in and said, well, the market is a tough place for women in Dinajpur in Bangladesh to negotiate prices, to haggle, etc. So we're going to do it for you. All proceeds go to the women group, but we will take the fish to the market. So now, this kind of ecosystem is needed for gender work to thrive. We need male inclusion. Gender work cannot work in silo. It cannot work on its own. We're not going to solely focus on women when we make policies. I need to check if this policy is in agreement with the gender norms, it's in agreement with the gatekeepers of society, etc. As a development practitioner, as somebody who informs policy making, if I do not look at what the half of the community that I am designing for is going to benefit from this policy? Am I really making holistic development in the community? If I'm not designing, thinking about the differential inequities and differential risks and outcomes that women face from this particular policy, am I really making a resilient, sustainable development policy? That's a question I ask myself every day, but it goes vice versa. Will this work in a setting? Will this policy work in a setting like India, wherein, unfortunately, men have a lot of space, take up a lot of space in autonomy? How do we engage with that kind of surrounding? So those are the two things that I often think about. I also often think about how development initiatives do not think about researching cultural significance, right? Remember the bread, the bakery initiative. So all in all, I want to say that what is absolutely necessity right now in terms of gender equity and development is we try and understand that, number one, most importantly, male inclusion is key. Number two, we really need to study the community and women more. And I would say when you study and engage with the women in the community more and give voices to their thoughts and ideas, that is when the most sustainable initiatives happen. So that is my conclusion, and thank you for listening.